For centuries, two superpowers have stood on opposite sides of the world. China, the dragon of the East, and America, the eagle of the West. One built its power through silence, discipline, and secrets buried deep in history. The other rose through rebellion, ambition, and the loud promise of freedom. But what if everything we know about them is only half the truth? What if behind the walls of the Forbidden City and the shining skyline of New York lies a hidden history of lust, betrayal, strange rituals, and forbidden desires that shaped how both nations came to rule the modern world? This isn't the story you read in textbooks. This is the secret war between civilization and temptation. China vs. America, the untold history. China's story begins along the Yellow River, where ancient farmers and warlords laid the foundation for what would become one of the oldest continuous civilizations on Earth. Thousands of years before America existed, dynasties rose and fell. The Shah, the Shang, the Zhou. Out of this chaos came philosophies that shaped Asia forever: Confucianism, Taoism, legalism. Systems that valued order, duty, and balance. America's story, in comparison, is much younger, a land discovered, conquered, and built on the clash of cultures. Its philosophy, born from revolution and the frontier spirit, prized freedom, individuality, and power through expansion. Two civilizations, two destinies. But while China sought harmony through hierarchy, America sought greatness through rebellion. And that difference, buried deep in their DNA, still defines their rivalry today. By the 1800s, the two worlds began to collide. Western ships forced their way into Chinese ports. Britain's opium flooded the markets. America arrived soon after, first with merchants, then missionaries, then soldiers. China, once the Middle Kingdom, suddenly faced humiliation. Opium wars, unequal treaties, and 1,000 years of pride shattered by foreign hands. And America, young, ambitious, restless, saw China as a mystery to be unlocked, a market to be opened, a soul to be converted. But hidden beneath the trade routes and treaties were unspoken fears. Each side saw the other not just as a rival, but as a reflection of what they didn't understand within themselves. Behind the Great Wall and the golden palaces of the Forbidden City lay a world few dared to speak of, a world ruled by beauty, control, and secrecy. The Chinese emperors were not just political rulers. They were divine symbols, sons of heaven. Their bodies were considered sacred, their desires cosmic acts, and their pleasure organized, calculated, almost mathematical. Inside the Forbidden City, thousands of concubines waited for a single man's touch. But the emperor's intimacy was not random. Every encounter was recorded, scheduled according to astrology and moon cycles. Who he slept with, when and how often. Everything was documented. The belief was simple: the emperor's sexual balance controlled the harmony of the entire empire. Too much indulgence would weaken him. Too little would anger the spirits. Sex was not just pleasure. It was politics, medicine, and destiny combined. And then there were the eunuchs, men who had sacrificed their manhood to serve inside the palace. They guarded the royal harem, bathed the concubines, and managed the emperor's private life. But the price of that power was unthinkable. Castration, complete removal of their organs, performed in silence, often without medicine. They called it serving the dragon. For centuries, these men became the empire's whisperers, spies, and shadows. They carried secrets no one else knew, and sometimes their loyalty turned into influence, corruption, even lust. There are stories of eunuchs who became lovers to lonely concubines, of forbidden nights that could destroy entire dynasties. But that was only one part of China's secret world. Hidden in old scrolls and temples were ancient manuals, books of pleasure and power. One of the most famous was called Yufang Miju, or Secrets of the Jade Chamber. It was said to hold the emperor's private instructions on the art of sex, how to channel energy, prolong desire, and reach immortality through control of the body. These weren't pornography. They were philosophers. They taught men how to make love in harmony with the universe, when to touch, when to abstain, and how to use intimacy to strengthen the soul. But such texts were dangerous. To possess them was to risk your life. During the Communist Revolution, one scholar who tried to publish the Jade Chamber Secrets was executed, his work labeled obscene and counter-revolutionary. His only crime was uncovering a forgotten truth about human nature. And yet, even today, fragments of those teachings survive in secret archives and whispered traditions. A glimpse into a world where desire wasn't sin, it was science. In the West, same-sex love was often condemned. But in ancient China, it carried a far more complex history. One of the oldest legends tells of Emperor A of the Han Dynasty who loved a young man named Dong Shun. One afternoon, Dong fell asleep on the emperor's sleeve. When the emperor needed to rise, he didn't wake him. He cut off his sleeve instead. From that day, the phrase, "the passion of the cut sleeve," became a symbol of male love. In the courts of emperors, among poets and scholars, same-sex relationships were not unusual. Some rulers even elevated their lovers to high rank. It wasn't seen as a scandal. It was seen as natural, part of the human heart. But as centuries passed, the moral codes of Confucianism grew stricter. The tolerance faded. Love that once lived in poems and palaces became shameful whispers. Still, the old stories remained, hidden in plays, art, and the quiet rebellion of those who remembered. While China's history embraced desire as cosmic, America's history buried it in guilt. The early settlers, the Puritans, believed pleasure was temptation and control was virtue. Sex was sacred, but only within strict rules. Yet beneath the surface of moral purity, something darker always brewed. In 19th century America, cities like New York, New Orleans, and San Francisco were filled with hidden brothels and secret clubs. Lawmakers preached morality by day, but indulged in vice by night. And when Chinese immigrants began arriving, poor, desperate, but hardworking, they were met not with welcome, but with fear. Chinese women were stereotyped as prostitutes. The U.S. government passed the Page Act of 1875, banning Chinese women from entering the country on moral grounds. It was America's first anti-Asian immigration law, and it was built entirely on sexual fear. The so-called land of the free had its own forbidden chambers, hidden not behind palace walls, but behind hypocrisy. China used sexuality as control. The emperor's bed was an institution, his pleasure a state function. America used sexuality as control too, but through suppression, shame, and moral panic. In both cultures, the body became a battlefield. In China, eunuchs symbolized loyalty through pain. In America, purity meant denying the flesh altogether. And yet, both societies were obsessed with sex, just in opposite ways. China documented every touch. America hid every touch. The forbidden became fascination, and fascination turned into fear. If you look closely, you'll see the strangest symmetry. China punished those who broke moral order. Concubines who rebelled, eunuchs who overreached, lovers who defied the code. America punished those who broke its own code. Interracial couples, queer people, liberated women. In both worlds, desire was political. To control someone's body was to control their soul. And even today, that pattern continues in censorship, in politics, in the way nations define morality against each other. For centuries, both nations have buried their most human truths. In China, the archives of imperial pleasure still exist, but hidden, locked away as sensitive. In America, the letters of gay soldiers, the confessions of politicians, the diaries of forbidden lovers sit sealed in boxes labeled private. The battle between repression and expression is far from over. China fears chaos. America fears shame. Both chase control, and both are haunted by what they can't control. Desire itself. Today, China's cities are filled with silent contradictions. Ancient temples stand beside neon skyscrapers. Young people search online for truths that once were punishable by death. The ghosts of the eunuchs, the concubines, and the lost lovers still whisper through the walls of history. And America, it still fights its own culture wars, freedom against morality, privacy against publicity. The same country that sells sex in its media condemns it in its laws. Different nations, same struggle. Both searching for a way to reconcile the sacred and the forbidden. In the end, China and America are not opposites, they are mirrors. Each sees in the other what it denies in itself. China sees America's sexual freedom and calls it corruption. America sees China's restraint and calls it oppression. But both are reflections of one truth. Power and desire are inseparable. For every wall that's built, another secret passage is dug. For every law that forbids, another story finds a way to be told. So, what is the untold history of China and America? It's the story of how two nations built their greatness on what they refused to admit. It's the story of how control and desire have danced together since the dawn of civilization. And it's the story of how, even now, each nation's greatest fear is not the other's power, but its own hidden reflection. Because in the end, every empire, whether ancient or modern, is built not only on weapons and wealth, but on secrets. And the most dangerous secret of all is the one it refuses to see in the mirror. In the end, the battle between China and America was never just about politics, weapons, or trade. It was about something far older. The human desire to control, to dominate, to hide our weaknesses behind walls and flags. China buried its secrets behind silence and ritual. America buried its guilt behind freedom and fame. But both are bound by the same truth. Power is never clean, and history is never innocent. From the forbidden chambers of emperors to the secret scandals of presidents, from ancient scrolls to modern screens, both nations have built their empires on stories they could never fully confess. So, as these two giants face each other today, remember this: the real war is not for land or money. It's for the right to define truth, and the one who controls the story controls the world. Because every empire hides its sins, and sometimes what's buried in history is far more powerful than what's written in it.